Welcome to the end, 2070. In my last video, I said that Catholicism is at the root of the demise of previously Catholic majority countries like Italy, Spain, Portugal, Croatia, Malta. And today I'd like to elaborate on this and explain why. Now, if we look at the Middle East, we'll find a similar trend. Let's take Christian minorities in Muslim majority countries, such as Egypt. In Egypt, the Catholic component of the population has always been very small. These are people who mainly converted from Coptic Orthodoxy because of the French, because of some Catholic missionaries, but their numbers has always been very small. So mostly below the 200,000 mark, maybe as little as 150,000. At the same time, the Coptic Orthodox component of the Christian population has always been above 95%. And you can see that the Copts in Egypt have not declined, neither in numbers nor as a percentage of the population. The decline was very small compared to other countries. So if you look at Egypt 100 years ago, the Christian population was around 14%. Of these, about 2% were Greek Orthodox, mainly living in Alexandria. Now, these Greeks in Alexandria returned to Greece, or left for Greece, leaving the Christian population by the 1940s, early 1950s, at around 12%, of which Copts were no less than 10.5% of the Egyptian population. Today, Copts are at least 10% of the population, maybe even 10.5%. And so you can see a trend there. Orthodoxy, in its various forms, tends to do good for people on a demographic level. Now, Catholicism, on the other hand, has been a very different experience and has resulted in a demise of at least two major Christian minorities in the Middle East. The first being Lebanon. Now, 100 years ago, so I'm talking about the mid-20s, at least 60% of the population in Lebanon were Christians. Of these, around 6-7% were Armenians who had fled Turkey, and around 40% were Catholics. Now, if you fast forward 100 years to this day and age, of course, Lebanon has had a terrible decade, a lot of economic hardships, and now a war. The Christian component of the population has declined to below 30%. And here I'm talking about citizens. So with around 29% of the population being Christian, no more than 17% are Catholics. But that only tells you part of the story, because Lebanon has now probably no more than 4 million citizens, but there is also 2 million, maybe 2,300,000 non-citizens. So I'm talking Syrians, Lebanese, Iraqis, Yemenis, Egyptian workers, Sudanese, Africans. And so if we take the Christians as a percentage of the total population of even 6 million, then their portion in the population is no more than 18%. And Catholics would be no more than 12%. Now these are very dramatic declines. 40% 100 years ago for Catholics, compared to 12%, maybe 13% today. In Iraq as well, the Catholics, who were mostly Chaldeans, were not so long ago, we're talking about 21, 22 odd years ago, there were as many as 2% of the population of Iraq. The deputy president, who was also the foreign minister, was himself a Chaldean Catholic. His name was Tariq Aziz. Those old enough will remember him. And the numbers have dropped dramatically. Though most of them lived in Baghdad, and Baghdad experienced less violence in the past 22 years. But still, the Catholic Chaldeans dropped from 2% to around 0.2% of the population. Now, if we compare them to other Christians, let's take the Assyrians. The Assyrians were a little less than 1% of the population just 22 years ago. Today, they're around 0.2, maybe 0.25% of the population. So it shows you something, it shows you a trend. Catholics leave in larger numbers. There is something about Catholic society that there is a glue that is missing. There is something that makes people alienated from each other. And the reasons are quite obvious. The doctrine is unbelievable. I mean, even to a very faithful Christian, a traditionalist Catholic, they're much more accepting of questioning of their doctrine, because deep inside they know it makes absolutely no sense. And this is really what has happened in Italy, and this is why I said that the decline in Italy and the ultimate demise of Italy as it is now, so I'm talking about a total transformation of the country, with parts of the country being occupied by another nation. This will happen because of the legacy of Catholicism. Now, this is something that right-wing parties cannot change. No right-wing ideology as we know it today has given solutions to the problem. And so the problem will persist and will continue to become worse and worse with every passing day. Now, if we look at the numbers, we see that there is not so much a problem with immigration in Italy. In fact, a lot of immigrants have chosen to leave Italy in the last 15 years due to stagnation in the economy. But even more importantly, in the last 2 years, since Meloni has become the Prime Minister, now of course Meloni has been branded a far-right politician, a neo-fascist, and very anti-immigration, especially Islamic immigration. And to a point, it is true insofar that maybe a lot of people from Muslim majority countries feel less welcome in Italy today than they were under Berlusconi, certainly than they were under the socialist governments of the past. And a lot of them have chosen to leave. Now, how many have chosen to leave is difficult to say. But you do notice a lot less. A lot less people from Pakistan, a lot less people from Morocco, a lot less people from Muslim majority African countries in the urban centers. Now, by a lot, I don't mean that they have gone. I don't mean that there is not a presence. I don't mean that you don't listen or hear Arabic or African languages on the streets. No, that's not the case. But I'm saying that compared to the 1990s, their numbers have dropped. Now, a lot of them today are Italian citizens. A lot of them have established themselves, so they own houses, they own businesses, and the second generation is quite well educated. And that is partly why you don't notice them, because visibly they're less noticeable, simply because they don't look very different to many Italians today. I mean, maybe racially, if you have a closer look, but the way they dress, their body language, and where they hang out is pretty much similar to that of the average Italian. And so, how many people left? It's difficult to say. I'd say that probably around 400,000, maybe 500,000 have left in the last 5 years. And I think that Meloni would like another 500,000 to leave. And I think she could well accomplish this task of hers, or this wish of hers. But is that a good thing for Italy? You see, a lot of the immigrants from Muslim majority countries are actually quite well off economically. Now, when I say well off, I don't mean they're well off compared to the average Italian, but they're well off compared to the average Pakistani, Uzbeki, Tajik, Afghani, Nigerian, Senegalese, Eritrean, Ethiopian, Chadian. And it means that in a country like Italy, where there is hardly any social net at all, because if you're unemployed, you're basically on the streets, begging or trying to somehow get by. And there is a huge homelessness problem in Italy. And most of the homeless are immigrants. And so, what is Meloni trying to accomplish by encouraging up to another 500,000 to leave Italy? A lot of these people receive money, remittances, from relatives who have already made the journey northwards. So these people would live now in Scandinavia, in Germany, in the Benelux countries, in Austria and Switzerland, in the US, in Canada, in Australia. And so this is a blow to the Italian economy. To lose 500,000 people in the space of 5 years has already been a blow to the Italian economy, which is why the Italian economy, partly why the Italian economy is stagnating. The Italian economy cannot grow under these circumstances, whereby there are less and less consumers with every passing day. Now, how much has the damage to GNP has been is a topic for economists to discuss. But I would say it's no less than 0.5% of GNP. Maybe as much as 0.75% of GNP. Another bad effect, which is inevitable, is that when people leave, the people who do stay, and I'm not talking only about immigrants, I'm talking about Italian citizens and native Italian citizens, are also affected negatively. Because in small towns, like the town I'm in now, even losing 20 or 30 people will make the town a lot less lively. Now, as I told you, you can see a beautiful swan just swimming there. See this beautiful white swan? In a town like the old city of Anguillara, or the historical center of Anguillara, where I told you around 600 people permanently live, there are only 6 children. Now, what I still didn't tell you is that of these 6 children, only 4 are Italians. Now, I know this for sure because I've heard them speak to their parents, and I've seen them. One girl is Ukrainian. The other is, and she lives with her mother. I think she's a single mother. I haven't asked. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The other is a Romanian child. I've heard him speak to his mother. One lady in this old town has 3 children, and I've seen them on several occasions. They go to school, they come back from school, they go to the cafe. And another lady has another daughter, and she seems to be Italian. Again, it's not important, but what I'm trying to illustrate here is that a loss of people is not only an economic loss, it is also a moral loss. If we look at Russia, just during the year after the Russian-Ukrainian war started, back in 2021, the loss of around 900,000 people was spoken about as a huge blow to Russia in the Western media. And yes, it was in many ways. It was mainly because around 600,000 of these 900,000 people were people who were wealthier than the average Russian. So they were mainly professionals in their 30s, in their 40s, and in their 20s. A lot more males than females because they were escaping the draft. They didn't want to enlist in the war. And they realized that because of sanctions, they won't be able to conduct their business as they did previously. So they wanted to move to countries where they could. Now, Russia has a population of around 135 million people. So the loss of less than 1 million is quite similar to that of losing 500,000 in a country like Italy that has less than 60 million. But nobody speaks of this in these terms. To lose another 500,000 will be another major blow for the Italian economy. Now, the whole fiasco with sending migrants to Albania, paying the Albanian government to house them in what is detention centers, really. Of course, it has no legal basis under EU law, and it won't really achieve anything besides a loss of money, which the Italian government doesn't have a lot of. And this shows you that even the so-called far-right politicians in Europe do not have a solution to the problem of always declining fertility rates and always increasing rates of migration of the natives to other countries. So what is the loss? The annual loss of population in Italy? And what is the population of Italy? That you will hear in the next video. Catch you later.